We'll convene the meeting here. I'll first by way of introduction. My name is Bill Dwight. I'm the City Council President. The previous meetings that we've had, and we're trying to figure out between 3 or 4 relative to the disposition of this property, were convened by the mayor here, the best dressed person at the table. We now have a new city charter, which makes me the talky guy, and certainly, fortunately, it does not stipulate that I have to be the best dressed man at the table because I haven't got his wardrobe budget. But anyway, so I'm Bill Dwight. I'm the City Council President. Thank you all for coming. I think the agenda is pretty straightforward and simple. This is a public discussion of the disposition, potential disposition of this property that we're sitting in right now. NCTV is recording this, and that will serve as the minutes of this meeting, and will be available to the public to access once it's posted on at the NCTV website. I'm going to start with introductions to folks here, but then I'm going to lay out the ground rules essentially. Please raise your hand to speak. Do you want them to come and speak at that microphone? No, that's going to pick them up in space? Okay. So when you're speaking, please identify yourself. That's all we ask. That identify yourself and be conscious of the fact that these things move better if your remarks are unique as opposed to repeating what somebody else has said over and over again. This is an informational meeting for everybody, for you, for us. As we try to figure out what the future is of this building that actually I think I can safely say that we all cherish. As I start with my introduction, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, starting with the City Council side over here, starting at this end of the table. David, would you be so kind to
David Murphy, Councilor, Ward 4.
Gene Casey, Ward 7. This is in my ward.
City Councilor Mary Ann LaBarge from Ward 6.
Bill Dwight.
Mayor David Narkowitz.
I'm Doug Liu, I'm on the committee.
Maureen Scanlon, I'm a community member of the committee and neighbor and local business person.
I'm Richard Cooper, Cooper's College, State Street, and a graduate of this school. Barely. Sat in that principal's office once. Just overseeing.
I'm Tom Smith. I'm a resident of the neighborhood.
The committee that just introduced themselves was established for the purposes of expanding the conversation and input. It's a citizens ad hoc committee, as you noted. And where we find ourselves today is that the school department has considered the surplusing of this building. And so far, and part of the motivation for the conversation is the city, while good at many things, being a landlord is not particularly within its best skill set. And as such, it is a serious consideration of surplusing this building and making it available for purchase and or investment. So with that said, Mayor, do you feel any story on this or history? No? Is there anything else? The ad hoc committee, does anyone want to speak to these points, or should we just get right to questions?
I would just add that there's 2 other graduates of the school at this table as well.
Down on this end over here.
So we actually have 3 graduates of Florence graduates.
And parents of graduates.
And parents.
And parents of graduates. And it should be said that with all these discussions historically in Northampton and any other community, when you're discussing the transition of a school property, you're talking about a cultural center, community center, and a point of sentiment and nostalgia that even if you suffered in the school, as Rich Cooper clearly did in the principal's office, the fact is that this building holds a special place and that informs a lot of people's conversations. So please, anyone want to start off with questions, recommendations, suggestions, discussion points? You could just speak there, that's fine.
My name is Michael Keeney. I am the chairperson of a group that meets on the second floor and a resident of Bridge Road. And our group has no outside opinions as far as to what the city does with the property. We trust you to make your own decisions. As a member of the group and a neighbor, I can say that 60 to 80 people per day use the facility. So it's a very vibrant and important cultural center for us. And as far as just the accommodations and the management, I think to a person, the members of the group really appreciate the space, the management, and so on and so forth. So it's a very high value to that 60 to 80 people per day. That's really all I have to say.
Did you say 60 to 80 people in your group?
Yes. Per day.
Per day.
7 days a week.
Thank you.
Mary?
My name is Mary Casper. My son graduated from the school, and I was part of the group that took over this building when it was declared, well, it wasn't declared surplus, when they closed the home experience here. And that was at the behest of Mayor Mary Ford, who got a group of us together who worked for the city and who also were residents of Florence and other concerned citizens. From that group, we formed something called the Friends of the Florence Community Center, which ran the building for, I think, almost 10 years. We knew at the time that the school department did not want to release the building, so we really took over a caretaker role more than anything. When the city first took over the building, they didn't really have a plan for closing it down, and the basement was flooded twice, the boiler burned down. It really needed somebody to take care of it, which we did as a nonprofit. We were able to get, Linda Desmond was the council of Ward 5 at the time, and she was on the board. Ray Ellerbrook ran the rec department, he was on the board. Larry Connor, a couple of other community people. So we got a I believe it was a $10,000 grant from the city to fix the boiler. And after that, we didn't come back to the city. We really ran it as a self-sustaining building based on the rents that were coming in. We were very lucky to get 2 Commonwealth Service Corps workers, so we didn't have to pay for staffing, and they could handle the booking of the space. We always saw it as a community space, and I think it served that function really well. It didn't cost us as much to maintain because our time was volunteer. We had a contract services worker who came in and managed the building but was not a full-time employee. So we were really able to do it with very little money. But we did make enough money through rent, especially using the auditorium as well as part of that, to keep the building going. When the school department decided that they wanted to bring the alternative high school back here, we gave it back to the school committee and we disbanded the organization. But I'd like to say that it really has served the community really well. This is one of the only auditoriums in any city school. The arts community in particular has been able to make use of the building, as have small businesses. I see someone here who was one of our first tenants and has been here since the 90s. Was able to stay in business, I think, because the rates were always reasonable. People, Richard has a studio here, has been here for many, many years, and has invested a lot in his studio and his equipment. And I would like to see a community use. I understand that the city doesn't want to, keep up the building, but what happened with South Street School was it a nonprofit neighborhood and sub-community identity within the city and the richness that brings. And I think that this has just been a real kind of gateway for involvement of, you know, people that aren't always fully franchised in the community to have a kind of sense of place and a way and a mechanism to get involved in the city in other ways. I meant to kind of go online and research all of the strategic plan values of the city and the different plans that have been done recently, but my guess is that the notion of sort of preserving this as a kind of a center, one of the centers of the community, is certainly aligned with many of those principles, because in some interesting way it's just become a whole nother kind of heartbeat and extension of downtown Florence, which I think is extremely rich. It's within walking distance. It's got kind of green principles. It's no accident that it's at the gateway of a number of roads that come into Florence and then enter into downtown Northampton proper. And I just like to echo Mary that you know, we're a rich, diverse, creative group of people who use this building, who come not just from Florence Village, but from the adjoining, you know, sub-areas. And I would just love to see an opportunity for us to plan and think through what are ways that we could, you know, address and respond realistically to the needs of the city. I understand that upkeep and maintenance of the building is probably paramount, and then secondary is you not wanting to be in a position of owning buildings. But I think it's just really important to give people time to reactivate and sort of think through what would be strategies, and to look at, and it's a very difficult time for funding, but I'm also a grant writer and have been known to pro bono my services. And I just think that I'm really grateful that you're here listening, and I trust that it's a real listening for different possibilities and not like, hurry up, we have to like resolve this problem immediately, because I think that it's just what goes on here is way too rich to just throw away in a couple of committee meetings that focus on, you know, practicality, which I'm not trying to diminish. I'll pass
I'm MJ Adams. I'm the Executive Director of Pioneer Valley Habitat for Humanity. We've been in this building for over 10 years, being relocated up here after we lost our office space in downtown Northampton. When we moved in here, it was so hard to get in here that we actually had to share space with another organization that did direct service with clients. So we had this sort of office schedule where they got the office half the day and I got the other half of the day. They eventually moved to a new location, and we got to roost down in the corner in the basement for a number of years, and then eventually had the chance to move upstairs and are in a beautiful classroom, which serves our organization extremely well. First of all, I've got to echo the sense of community involvement and the number of people who wander in and out of the doors here every week. With Habitat's schedule, I'm here sometimes Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, Thursday night at 7 p.m. The range of activity that happens here almost around the clock is extraordinary. And the number of people that this gentleman was referring to is really true. You get here at 7 o'clock in the morning, the parking lot is full. You have to park in Porticello Street. So there's a lot of community activity that does happen here. The other thing that it is, it's a real affordable place for people to get their foot in the door. A number of nonprofits get started here in Mobile. I happen to stay here because I think it's the best location in the world for us. But it's a real functional space for nonprofits to get going. And it's hard to find affordable nonprofit office space that is somewhat tied to services. We do have a bus route, but there is that sense of community that comes in and out the door that pulls people into the activities that are here. Valley Free Radio, the groups that meet here, people coming up for orientation at Habitat. There's all sorts of people coming in and out of this building all the time. The arts communities that use it, the teachers, the yoga folks. There's just so much activity here that it's really a little buzz of community, and I would hate to lose it. The other thing that I recognize that the city is not always best at being landlords, but I think you guys have been terrific landlords here. I've got to say your staff has been responsive, that when we've had problems with our building, our offices, that your staff have been very responsive, and we appreciate. We know that our rent is very affordable. we appreciate that very much, but we also want to respect and honor the fact that we think we've been pretty good landlords. At least that's been my experience. The other thing that I think is important too is that I've lost my train of thought. So rather than say something idiotic, I'm going to just sit down and say, oh, I know what it is. That if you are thinking about giving us making some different uses, please give us all enough lead time so that we can make reasonable plans. I think that's the thing that we're most anxious about as tenants in this building, is that, you know, there's nothing like this in the valley, and it's really quite unique. And as we actually met as tenants a couple weeks ago, and we were like, where would we ever go? And not that we want to go anywhere, but just the thought of having to find another place to call home that will work so well for us as organizations and for the people who come and rely on our services, I think is not a quick process. So whatever your considerations, please think about the timing when you're doing that and give us enough lead time to make other plans if you do indeed decide that this needs to be put into other use. Thank you.
I'm Stefan Wood-Wheaton. I'm co-chair of the board of Valley Free Radio. We've been downstairs for 7 years now and still strong. I don't want to, infringe on any more time at this meeting by echoing, I think, what you've already heard very well expressed at this meeting so far, which is the concern over losing public space and losing the kind of petri dish of nonprofit activity, business activity, and community activity that's taking place at this building for years and years now. I do think that sort of proceedings between the city and the tenants here have been complicated by somewhat, spotty communication in terms of what precisely the problems are. I mean, obviously there are issues of maintenance, general upkeep of the building, coding, things like that that are sort of easily inferred. But I would really enjoy, and I think it's necessary to have a stronger
One of the things that we did when this committee first got together was we actually had a tour as a group and met with Mike and met with Dave and really went through what are some of the big issues. And there are a number of pretty major issues, including, not the least of which are accessibility issues. The building does not meet ADA requirements that most public buildings are required to meet. There's some serious physical plant issues. Water, those of you who are tenants on the basement floor, lower level, I probably don't have to tell you about those issues, but there's water and drainage issues. There are, lead, asbestos, I mean, just all the kinds of issues that come along with a building of this age. So when we did our energy assessment of all of our city buildings, we had some fairly large figures that it would be required to really bring this building up to code and to the old boilers that are in the basement, which are highly inefficient. It would take a major investment to try to bring those up to what they need to be. So I think that's part of the issue is, we're in a situation as a city where we don't have a lot of resources. We have very limited resources. The school department has now surplused the building to the city. They've said they no longer have a use for it, so they no longer control it. And so we want to find out what the future use of it is. But those are some of the major issues that are facing the building. And I'm happy to recognize David or Mike, or if you want to chime in or add to any of that.
No, I think that's a fairly succinct synopsis as far as what the plant issues are here. Basically, if we were going to maintain and continue to use the building between the boilers, some environmental issues, energy efficiency issues, as well as access. As the mayor said, we'd be looking at having to put an elevator in, convert the bathrooms on the second floor for handicap access to truly meet the ADA codes. And the numbers, there are a lot of digits that go with those numbers. So just to sort of continue to use the building, structurally it's a fortress. And there's nothing wrong with the building structurally. It's just that we're looking at a lot of, because of its age, needs that would have to be addressed as we move forward, that we couldn't enjoy.
So do you want to just recognize Susan Wright, who can talk about probably the financial picture?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring out so that people understand the income from the building in fiscal 12, which ended June 30th, was about $98,299. That leaves a maintenance budget for all the other things, about $15,000. So we don't have a lot of depth as far as where we can go if we do run into a major maintenance problem. So right now we're about breaking even. Rents are covering the cost of running the building, and that's if nothing major big happens as far as repairs.
Just a clarification, is this floor here fully rented out since the school moved out?
No, we have not been able to rent some of this just in part due to the uncertainty of the building. Nobody wants to move their business here if they don't know how long they will be able to rent. So there are four or five more spaces that could be rented.
You, sir, first. You can please.
I heard what you said about the city not being a good landlord. The building looks better than it did when our kids went there in the 80s, but it helped to have some financial information, and I'm glad to hear that the building is breaking even, but do you have any quantification of what it would cost to bring the building up to code? That's question number one. Question number two is, why aren't this building eligible for CPA funds? I see what the city did with the Academy. I mean, the Academy Music got hundreds of thousands of dollars from the marquee, for the doors, and for energy efficiency, and that's been a beautiful result. Why couldn't that money be applied here if it's $100,000 or $200,000? I've seen the grants that size go through, and I'm not going to repeat what everyone else says about the best use of this building, because I think everyone here is going to speak in favor of what this does for the community. But I think the public would need to know, if we're hearing big numbers, how big are they, and do we have other sources to keep this building alive?
That's a fair question. Hang on, Mary, because I heard that as a question also. David, you feel comfortable giving some ballpark figures on that?
Sure. If you look at, again, these are what are called budget. These are what are called budget estimates. So in other words, we don't have firm quotes. There's no firm architectural engineering studies that have been done. But what we're looking at for an elevator, the boiler work, asbestos abatement for the boilers, security system, windows, handicapped access for the bathrooms on the second floor, the site drainage work that the mayor alluded to with the water that comes in during the summer months when we get severe thunderstorms. Work on the parking lot because we have to basically repave that lot or we're going to lose it. We're talking somewhere in the range of $1 to $1.2 million. That's to do everything. And the other thing you need to keep in mind, that any work that would be done in this building, because it's municipal work, we'd be looking at paying prevailing wages. So, which are union level wages, not the wages you'd be paying for carpenters to come and work in your business or your house. So that is a great inflator to what we're looking at as potential costs to do all the work in the building. So we're somewhere in that $1 million to 1.2 range at this point with budget numbers only.
Just in terms of the CPA question, I have to research that. I don't know if this would qualify as a historic structure. I mean, it may be historic in terms of Florence, but in terms, we'd have to research that question, whether it would qualify to the level that something like the Academy, which is on the National Historic Register, or Forbes. We can certainly research that. Whether or not this would qualify, I don't know. But that's a great suggestion. We can research that.
It was just a point of information that we made this first floor handicapped accessible through community development block grant funds, in part because we had a teen center and we had elder services were working out of the building, so that qualified the building. We never had enough money, obviously, to put in the elevator, but we did get the waiver to do it for the first floor, and we got the bathrooms done at the same time. We also redid the parking lot, and I'm pretty sure it was Richie Caraceletti who did the parking lot. So it was, the city was very
priming them to manage the city streets eventually.
Yes.
It should be also noted that the CDB, Community Development Block Grant Funds, are federal dollars that are given to the community to reinvest, and consequently they are also the first thing that everyone hacks before it gets to the city, and our portion of CDBG funds has been reduced substantially from the time so we've actually gone way down from the time that you were making appeals, back when we were giving much larger grants for projects like that, and right now we have a lot of block grant funds already tied into some projects that are already, that we're paying off now. That would not be the panacea, I'm afraid. It might be able to supplement, but it's unfortunately not the answer that it used to be. Any other thoughts, questions, please, because this is MJ and then back to you.
Just a quick question, just what's your committee time frame? I mean, I know you were having an appraisal done on the property this fall. But do you have any sort of sense of your own time frame in terms of moving forward with public discussion and decision points?
As I understand, there is no deadline. Right? There's no deadline. In fact, actually, we've been committed from the start of this to fully vet and investigate the best use for this property. That's our intent. And the liquidating it, the sort of Damocles is any major structural calamity that may be visited, in which case this might be forcing the issue a little quicker. But the fact is that what started this process is what the mayor said was the school department's decision to no longer retain this property. So it goes back to the city to figure out what is the best use. And part of the impetus of the discussion is of course, and it hasn't been mentioned, but I think it's hanging out there, is that this property's off the tax rolls. We're under a lot of pressure here to generate revenue for the community. Possibly, we're also investing in the prospect of putting this back on the tax rolls as a private mill.
Can I just add?
Please.
So the committee did vote to order an appraisal, to do an appraisal. I think one of the things that we're hoping we've asked the appraiser to look at are what could be a kind of a best use for a facility like this. So we're trying to get sort of an understanding of what those potential reuses could be. So just so that we have that context as we come up with whatever RFP or whatever decision that the committee comes up with.
And I want to assure everyone, the fix is not in. There is no particular project in mind. In fact, actually, I think I can safely say that everyone here shares your same interest and desire to maintain this as a community asset and hub. And we're not in it to make a turnaround for a quick buck. But I'm glad that you're having the opportunity to understand the pressures that we're at this point. So.
Oh,
And we'll let Gene and then.
also, I believe we set the guideline for whether there's a timeline. We have structured the leases to be short-term, is that correct?
Right now, the leases are running on fiscal year. The one-year leases, and they come up June 30th every year.
I have a great emotional, sentimental attachment to this building, by the way. I do not have to be upstage by Rich Cooper. I think I spent more time in the principal's office right there.
I don't think we're setting a very good example for any students in Northampton if we're saying they're city officials and
Thank you.
in great years here, we're spending most of the time in the office. Oh, Mary Ann, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mary, I want to thank you for being here. I worked very close with Mary Caspers in the property committee several years ago. Alex Giesland and I think Linda Desmond was with us also. And there has been a problem. Even when our former mayor, Mary Ford, of what we did with the building, we did the best that we could. And then even with Mary Claire Higgins, the issue kept coming up about the cost and the upkeep of this building. And I know your group did a wonderful job because you really took a lot of pressure off the city, and it was really an honor that we worked with you.
I'm Michelle Ryan, I'm the owner and operator of Florence Yoga up on Suite 12. And I welcome you all to come to the yoga class sometime. And some of my students in Suite have shown up as well to show their support for this building and the space. And I just want to say I opened in 2009. I'm one of the newer tenants in the building and started from really nothing. Only a couple of students in the hotel supported it. And I wanted to open a yoga studio, teaching the yoga that I do. There wasn't a Michelle studio in Northampton. Actually, the closest studio that teaches, I know there's a lot of yoga studios in Northampton, but the closest one to my studio that teaches the same thing was in Great Barrington. So there isn't, I have a lot of people that come from Keene, New Hampshire, Brattleboro, Vermont, West Hartford, Connecticut, to come and actually come in to take yoga with my teachers, myself, because it's not really offered anywhere else around here. And when they come, they're not only just coming into yoga class and going home, they're going downtown, they're having lunch, they're shopping. So they come and they can actually experience Northampton as a whole, actually, to the yoga class. And since I've opened, I've had about 600 students come through, and I have about 50 regular students now. We have 14 classes a week, and I get about an average of about 12 people per class. So, which is pretty good. After 3 years, I'm really proud of that. It's a beautiful space. I love my little school room. I love my chalkboards. I still have the chalkboards. We use them all the time. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time and money making it into a great space, and I really appreciate it. I want to stay here. And as a small business owner, it's been really great for me to be able to have a place that has free parking, because that's so unheard of in Northampton. That's convenient. It's on bus routes. I have people that bike on the bike trail and come. And we got a bike rack a couple of years ago because I had a couple of students were asking for that. So it's been a great experience for me to be here. And Mike Leland and Darlene have always been so responsive, and community thing. We all get it. It's a community space, but it's also a small incubator space, and that's what I think is an opportunity for economic development as part of your mandate is, as leaders of the city, is to help foster economic development and community development. And have you considered a small incubator space here, a small business incubator space? That's a possibility that's here and can be utilized. So I think that's just something I want to throw on the table. And again, come to the yoga class. There's one at 6.
And you're next.
Hi, I'm Christy Spain. I've lived here 10 years. I was involved for a number of years with the dance studio, upstairs Studio Firenze. I don't know if Emily is here, but you know, it's a place of a lot of different kinds of dance activity and yoga. But I just wanted to mention, from a broader kind of political perspective, when I got out of college, way back when, we still had a lot of support for the arts. As a dancer, there was a dance touring program in this country where any college could pay 1/3 of the cost of bringing a dance company into a performance, and the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, would pay the other 2/3. As we know, support for the arts in this country has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And it just occurred to me sitting here that the model of support your local business and support your local culture, and I've taken a vow this Christmas, I'm buying all my gifts locally, I'm not going to big box stores, and this growing awareness of how do you keep the vitality of support in a relationship with your locality, that maybe that works two ways, and that as this building is a prime illustration of community support for many creative endeavors like poetry. I'd like to invoke the name of Carl Russo with his poetry show on Valley Free Radio, and many things like that go on in this building that are not moneymakers, but as a society as a whole, we do care. We care. We do value the arts. In Ireland, for example, they didn't have money to pass out to support artists. Their version of support was, if you're an artist or a writer, you don't pay income tax. That's their gift. Every society finds some way to support the creative endeavors. I don't mean just artists for their own expression, but in this building, not that there's painters here, I don't know if there are, but this is a building also devoted to helping people, like have their own radio show or have a dance class, have the general population has easy access to the arts in their own life at whatever level. So I was just sorry for rambling, I just wanted to throw out an idea. I don't know about finances, but it seems we're at a new point in history of localities looking at capitalism in a new way of keeping that capital local and looking also at necessary thinking about the future, like solar heating instead of oil. Oil is a dinosaur. There are many. This problem that we're facing could actually be a creative opportunity for us to look at how can we, as a big family, as this town, save the building, support the stuff that's going on here. Maybe there's grants for changing to solar. Maybe we can do huge fundraisers on an annual basis to pay for elevators. Maybe we can help in the way Mary's team helped. Maybe there's a new version of a community team to take it off your backs.
If the committee was to put the RFP towards a community purpose rather than for the financial purpose, we'd be very interested in putting an RFP in. And we would operate the building as a social enterprise. And with hopefully the community to benefit, but also the commerce generated from the building would go directly to support the Northampton Public Schools. We would try to leverage whatever we could through grant writing, etc., to make this functional. And I do understand that there is a significant investment to be made in the property. So, if there was anybody that might want to have further discussions on that, I'd be happy to engage in that, and look forward to see where the RFP would be leading us.
Clarification in terms of an RFP is a request for proposals is something that we have to draft up, and when we do this, if we dismantle this building, we send out a request for proposals, and Jim is referring to if we get to draft the language, advance our best wishes reflected in the RFP. The gentleman sitting next to you is next.
Hi, my name is Rob Kimmel. I am a new transplant, so I can speak for Florence temporarily. I've been here for less than a year. But I bought a house here in Florence, very deliberately. I have a kid who goes to Jackson Street. I moved here from Brooklyn, where I was for 15 years. And this space reminds me a lot of what things were like in Brooklyn before. And there's a lot of energy and a lot of dynamism that's happening in Brooklyn, which I'm speaking of just because I'm familiar with that. And a lot of it was like public-private coalitions and partnerships that generated things for lots of different segments of the population and generated a lot of money. I'm a graphic designer, and I was a professor at Pratt for 8 years. So my life sits at the cross-section of like art, commerce, and education. So from that point of view, I see this place as being an amazing opportunity. And one of the reasons that we moved to Florence instead of somewhere else in like downtown was that there seemed like a lot of things about to happen here. And I got a plot at the community garden over here, which was fantastic. And being part of that and seeing how really well run that was, and how many different people were participating and giving real talent to that action and seeing it grow, gives me real hope that Florence is different than downtown Northampton. It's maybe a place for spaces like this to really, create this like alternative space and not just, the political aspect of it, the social aspect is great, but I'm also, I'm a capitalist, I believe in business too. And I think that this is a good place for all of that to kind of flourish. And so having a kid at Jackson Street, he could ride his bike from our house to school, which is magnificent, and that replaces kind of the street level culture I'm used to. And this too is an easy bike ride for kids, and I could see this being a great opportunity to have classes, to have not-for-profits, and to have small businesses. And I think that can share the space. I think having these walls here and the modest amount of money that it sounds, because $1 million doesn't sound like that much in the grand scheme of things. I think that could be raised through different channels. Even if the federal government says no, we don't give money to art anymore. I think there's other ways to get that money from different levels, or just like fundraising. But $1 million seems like a small cost to pay to have this, in the city's portfolio of cool spaces. And so I used to teach at Pratt, and I know that in the 70s, Pratt owned an enormous amount of structures around their campus and sold them when the neighborhood looked like it didn't care. And those all became condos and things like that, and were lost. And then when kind of that heat and energy came back to Pratt and wanted to expand, they had to build new buildings, and it cost an enormous amount of money to do that. And then lost touch with something that could have been part of the community, anchor, and they sold it for a short-term gain. And it would be a shame if a space like this fell victim to that as well. So that's my question.
Yes, you and then.
I just have one comment to make. My name is James Wright. I'm Michelle's husband. And when I think about this space, and I understand the pressure the city is under to turn things that are not paying taxes over to the tax rolls. But at the same time, when you're looking at these businesses, and I don't know who these tenants are in these buildings or in this building, but a lot of them are small, very small businesses that barely make a profit. And these same people would not be in business in downtown Northampton because they can't afford the rent. So what happens is, if this becomes a condominium complex, generates taxes back to the city, becomes some type of office building privately owned, you're gonna stunt growth of small businesses. I know the yoga studio upstairs would not be open today. There's probably other businesses here that would not be open today because the rent that's paid here, these same businesses can't pay in downtown. And I think for that reason, people who have some entrepreneurial spirit need a space like this. And I think there's some obligation from the city of Northampton to try to preserve that opportunity for people in and outside the city probably a little bit, maybe a little bit easy to say, listen, we got to put this back in the tax roll. We can't afford $1 million or $1.2 million. I agree with the gentleman from Pratt. $1 million. $1 million isn't a lot of money. You can, buy a two-family house in Northampton's $200,000 or $300,000. So $1 million, it sounds like a lot of money to people who can barely pay the rent. But I don't think $1 million is a big enough price tag to send this to a private entity. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Liu. I'm a Florence resident. I'm a landscape architect in the city. There's been a lot of good comments from me already. I'm not going to repeat all of them. But I just want to say this is just such a tremendous resource, a community asset. It's got such great visibility and accessibility. It's so easy to get. I want to speak about, my experience with this building on a very personal level. I've been going to Michelle's yoga studio for just over a year consistently. I turned to yoga to help me battle my decades-long issues with back problems, etc. And I've gotten much more out of it. I've come to realize that this is a place where I spend probably the fourth most amount of time in my week. I'm here regularly 3 or 4 times a week and sometimes 5 times during the week. And somebody else had mentioned all the people that come and go. Every time I come here, whether it's in the morning or evening or during the day, which is rare because I work a regular kind of 8 to 5 type job, but I see all sorts of people here. There's always activity here. I think it could be more vibrant. We all understand what pressure the city's under, but I think I'd hate to see this turned over to like a private type developer that would consider changing this to condos or office space. I think this incubator space is a tremendous resource for the city, especially for Florence, and I hope that if an RFP goes out, that there could be some type of first priority given to somebody that would want to or have interest in keeping this facility as that type of small business starter type space, which I think is really needed in every community. So I'm interested to see how things go, and if the need arises, and if somehow I can donate my professional design services for drainage problems. Maybe you've already got that figured out. Accessibility issues on the exterior. I would be more than happy to donate my time. I've been involved in several projects where I've donated my time to manpower at Jackson Street School with a couple of projects, Sojourner Truth Memorial. I can't think of some of the others, but I've been involved in several other pro bono type activities in the city, and I'd be happy to be involved here as well.
My name is Peg Whittam, and I've been living in Florence for about 35 years, and I just came to hear what people had to say, and what's running through my mind right now is the potential for this building to be a vibrant place, the potential for this building to be an inclusive place. If I go downtown in Northampton, and I love Northampton, but if I go downtown Northampton, it's pretty homogeneous. It's pretty all the same. And I think that here in Florence, the diversity and the different financial levels of the people all still are able to live together. I mean, I think of Pivot Media, and this fellow moved, and he's in a new place, but I think the accessibility in Florence to people who are just starting out, to businesses that are just starting out, to really encourage this whole diversity of occupation, this whole diversity of what people need, and how Florence or this place can supplement their needs. I mean, to me, this is what I'm thinking, that this is a unique place and can still be run as a unique place. Right now, Northampton's put hundreds of thousands of CPA money into their recreation, into their fields, into their bike paths, and maybe it's time for them to look at existing buildings within the city that they can support too.
I'm Diane Riddle. I live up the street, Blockhouse here in Florence. I love Florence. I've taken yoga classes here. I've worked at AFSC, the American Friends Service Committee when it was here. I helped with the Valley Free Radio when it first launched, and came to the community garden sign up here. There's lots that goes on here. There's the CET, Center for Ecological Technology, does workshops here on energy efficient windows and stuff. So it's a valuable place, and I think that that's recognized. I have a question about the city's ability to accept volunteer proposals. Well, I worked on a building for Habitat for Humanity, and there were experts who were there who knew how to build, and they sort of drove the teams, but they were volunteers, and then there were volunteers who were just there willing to work, and that seemed to work out well to put up a house, it seemed like work. And I wasn't sure if the city is able to accept that kind of volunteer impetus. So that's one question I have. And the other question I had is if there's any expertise in having mixed-use space. Could there be residential apartments in the building along with businesses?
Do you want to speak to that?
So in terms of the second question about the zoning of the facility, it's been zoned now, it's called office industrial, which is sort of what it's zoned for. But because it's an existing school structure, there's added flexibility in our zoning now because of some new zoning that was enacted, that if a proposal came forward that could sort of create a better kind of reuse for a facility, that the planning board is allowed to sort of grant a variance from what the standard zoning is. This zoning was designed somewhat with an eye towards some of our churches in town that are now going to be coming on the market, and if we certainly want to make sure that we can preserve as many of these structures as possible. So there would be, I think there'd be the flexibility for residential in a future reuse. The volunteer labor thing gets a little tricky, as David alluded to, on a public building. We're required to pay prevailing wages, and even in a case, and we've had several of them recently, where a business wants to make a donation to pay for work on a public sidewalk or on a public street, they have to pay prevailing wages. Even they may be a private company, but they still have to abide by those rules. So that's a little bit trickier. So that's not quite as easy.
What if someone's not taking pay? They're volunteering their work?
We have to think through that. It depends on what we're talking about, if it's building or if it's maintenance, or it's kind of a fine line, because we also, our maintenance staff, our maintenance employees are unionized in the city, and so there are often issues around accepting volunteer labor because of the fact that we have employees who are contracted to provide those services. This often comes up in the schools. We have people that want to volunteer to be librarians, that want to volunteer to do things, but those are union positions. So we're not allowed to kind of skirt that. So that's something we have to really look at, what the structure would be under those circumstances. I mean, I think we have a lot of the engineering. We have a lot of the design work of what we kind of know what has to happen. It's really having funding to be able to pay for it. And I'm not, and given licensing around elevators, for example, it's not really something I think we could have volunteer labor for, because we have to have, they're licensed and inspected.
We're talking about windows.
Exactly, I understand, yeah.
I'm not talking about.
Yeah, I get that, but I just mean some of the structural stuff would be difficult to do. But I understand what you're suggesting, and we can certainly look at that.
I just, Mary, you had said that you had volunteer custodial help at one point.
No, we had a former state employee, he was getting the state, was only allowed to work a certain number of hours. And he worked as a contract laborer. He set his own hours, he brought his own tools, so we were able to legally pay him as a contract laborer. We didn't have to pay what
So we could,
least
that
expensive way.
could possibly happen again here.
It could, but I have to say that it took, I think, 4 years to get the federal government to recognize us as a nonprofit. The state did it in the first year, but Linda Desmond spent quite a bit of time making the argument that we were using it for a nonprofit basis because, in fact, we were almost subsidizing the rents, and that was part of the issue. And we had, the teen center, we had a number of other reasons, but it took an effort to get them to grant us nonprofit status.
I've been handed a letter here that, for the purpose of reading into the public record, someone wasn't able to be here today. Hello, I live in Florence, a short distance from the former grammar school, which is now the Florence Community Center. I go to the building once or twice a week to attend classes at the Movement Innovations on the 3rd floor.
Actually, that's
This is a letter from Martha Bishop. And she said, I live in Florence, a short distance from the former grammar school, which is now the Florence Community Center. I go to the building once or twice a week to attend classes at Movement Innovations on the 3rd floor. It's a wonderful building. I really enjoy being in it on a regular basis. I look forward to being in that space. It's one of the things that motivates me to go to Pilates class. On my way to class, I remember how lovely it is to go there, and somehow forget that there is a grueling workout ahead. I also see by taking the stairs up to the 3rd floor that there are several nonprofits and other small businesses using the building. There are not a lot of places in Florence for small businesses to incubate and grow. It's really nice to see them here. I also know that community groups use the auditorium. It's terrific to have this resource for the community to use. I know you are holding a public meeting next Tuesday to discuss the future of the building. I'm not able to attend the meeting. I'm hoping you'll take my comments into consideration as I'm a citizen of Florence and someone who uses that building regularly. Sincerely, Martha Bishop.
And seem to have the community's best interest in mind. And I'm just wondering, as I'm listening to the group here in the room, and the fact that we're here together in the hall seems to indicate that there might be a possibility of coming together somehow a little bit more formally as a group rather than, as a city and its tenants, to maybe, instigate some sort of collaborative effort to keep to meet the needs that the building's facing at the moment. Just knowing that it's going to take a certain amount of a dollar amount to get things put right, and even entertain the idea of continuing. Maybe there might be some brainstorming between the tenants and the city as far as how to increase revenue for the building, probably possibly do some public outreach, maybe do some city-sponsored functions that benefit the community somehow. That would be like use of this auditorium. I know that it's dormant a large amount of the time, but maybe there could be some sort of weekly congress here of some sort of you know, films to watch or something that might be able to draw a small admissions amount, and maybe promote the building a little bit more, you know, as far as the its visibility within the public. I mean, nobody's going to come to the party unless they're invited, and I know that a lot of people don't know about this, except for the outreach that the tenants are doing on behalf of the building for their own, you know, businesses that they're conducting here. So I was just wanting to find out if it might be possible to organize something that might bring us a little bit closer together as far as brainstorming committee is concerned.
To that end, I think that well, certainly it seems to go several people here in this room to be amenable to that. Right. And we are available. I agree, this weird arrangement, this formality that we have structured, that it kind of creates this power source, disempowered dynamic that I would, you know, I'd be glad to step on the other side of the table and speak as a human being with any group that wants to assemble. And so, for the purpose of this, the public meeting, work, any nod towards formality, what you're experiencing now is, we're going to stay within that context, but this is not the last conversation by any means. So business cards and such, and we're all available on the website, but and I believe you have lots of people willing to participate in the same level. So. Mary Ann, actually Rebecca was Jackson, and
I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the precedent in terms of repurposing some of the other schools. I know that the community center bought the South Street.
The music center.
Music center, I mean. And then did the daycare buy Pfeiffer? Or
not at all.
So what happened with the community music center, which was another elementary school, actually in my neighborhood that closed, there was a similar reuse committee that looked at whether there was any possible city uses for the building, and then an RFP went out, and the Northampton Community Music Center leased the space from the city for a minimal amount, $1 a year. But as part of the lease, they agreed to take on the capital expenses for the building. So they fundraised, they restored the physical plant, they dealt with the roof and the building issues. And that lease was recently extended even more for them to allow them to be able to do even more capital work in the building, which they did in phases. So that's a city-owned building that we leased to that nonprofit to be able to carry out their mission. And then the lease has an ending point in 20 or so years, and there's a right of first refusal of the Community Music Center to have the opportunity to purchase it at that time.
So theoretically, in theory, you'd be open to some parallel process.
I think that's definitely a potential model. And so, yeah, and the similar Pfeiffer School, Susan,
Pfeiffer is still in the school department's purview. They never surplused it. They did an RFP process because they wanted to attract a daycare. And then the building was renovated. We spent about $150,000, and the tenant actually paid the debt service for that renovation. So really no city dollars went into it, but the city retains the use of it. We've done 2 leases. The first was 5 years. I think the second lease is what's in effect now. It's about a 6-year lease. So,
could you share with us what the amount of the leases are in both of these buildings, just to give us an idea?
It's $1 a year for South Street.
And then Pfeiffer?
Pfeiffer, I think, is about $13,000 a year. And they pay, in addition to the $13,000 for rent, they pay all utilities, all labor costs, and they pay They pay actual utilities.
Same with South Street, I
Right.
believe. Yeah.
What's the Vernon Street School arrangement?
Vernon Street is in the process of having a lease update at this point. And their current lease, or the previous lease, was, I think, about $1 a month or $1 a year. And they're responsible for all improvements
And
to the property.
they have a pretty big capital expense looming there.
So that's a different scenario as far as other different types of capital needs are just there.
So there are definitely models, but obviously in the South Street model, which I think has really been a great success, they've paid for all of these major capital needs in the building shell. And the change we did with the most recent lease was we extended that to the exterior of the property as well. Previously, they were only responsible for the building. We had a major capital need outside the building, a retaining wall that was collapsing. So when we amended the lease, they agreed to take that on as well.
Okay, South Street, how they did it, and also Fiker. And I think, Councilor Dwyer, isn't the arts looking for a place to rent?
The Center for the Arts had built into the transition transaction for that was a 30-year lease, I think, for a public space that was, which became the Center for the Arts, and that lease is about to expire. But yeah, so that's another consideration.
I just wanted to say I was on the South Street School Reuse Committee, and the reason that committee chose to go through those steps was it was very strongly felt in the community that they didn't want to lose the building. A lot of it had to do with losing William Street and with losing that building. There was some sense in the community that the city never benefited from losing those buildings. So there was a very strong community sentiment to keep the building. What I don't think people realized was how terrible that building was. I mean, there was no roof. Everything had fallen in. It was just an unbelievable mess. But the committee wanted to keep that building for educational or cultural uses, and that was how the RFP was crafted. But it also was crafted that there was a big financial burden on whoever was coming into that building. And they put a tremendous amount of money in.
It was a significant
Yeah,
reinvestment.
it was much worse than this building.
And it's been great for the neighborhood.
It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's where it's been.
But it was really the community that came to that committee and said, we want to keep this.
I would also just add that when your committee met, we were still looking for a senior center was on the radar, police station. There were a number of facilities that we still had needs for, and some of those are no longer on the list in terms of what we need for a city. In many cases, we've tried to consolidate and sort of, we're not really in expansion mode right now these days. So,
Robert, you were next.
Well, there is one entity that's still on the list, and that's Arts Center. And I don't know why they're not still there. It seems to be a natural anchor tenant for this building to engage in the type of activity that we had with the Fiker School and the South Street School. Something got overlooked in assembling this committee was putting somebody in this building probably on that committee. ago. I used to own Ralph's Brothers on Maple Street. This building isn't unique as far as an incubator space in Florence. It's unique to you people because it's your I'd like to see this building better preserved than it is now. And that's a sad part. From doing a quick numbers crunch, even if your organization is got this building for nothing, you're probably looking at doubling your rent short of some creative financing. You are getting it for $1. You are getting it for $1 a year now, or less, if you do the numbers, because it's breaking. So, and it needs $1 million worth of improvements to be improved properly. And that's something you guys should maybe look at as a group, forming some sort of alliance.
There is in Northampton, there's establishment of the Arts Trust, and it probably would be a bad idea to reach out to them and see. I know that they're investigating, and I know they're aware of the discussions surrounding this building, so looking for a combined space that also involves the Center for the Arts and other arts venues for the community. Yes.
Hi, my name is Emily Fox, and I'm a member of the Dance and Movement Studio on the top floor, Studio Perez. And I have a letter here from one of our members where she echoes a lot of what's been said here, but she mentions another point that I think is really important. She's been part of the studio here since 1995. She's been a performance and movement artist in Northampton since 1974. And she said that she has watched as one precious space after another has turned from community space into a private office space or condos. And now that the Center for the Arts is going, it's one less space that's available that way. And I just want to point out that part of what's special around here is that we have a reputation as being an arts community, and that's one of the things that draws people here. And you need, just as you need to have incubator spaces for businesses, you also have to have incubator space for the arts, because as we know, most artists don't have a lot of financial resources. But if we don't have a place for people to develop their work and then have it available for the community, it's not going to be as attractive for people to come and shop in the stores and eat at the restaurants and all the other ancillary money that comes into town as a result of that. I'm going to make a couple other comments. We're a break-even venture right now. There's a lot of vacancies in here. If those vacancies were filled and we were getting rent out of those, we would be way beyond break-even. The other thing is that what this building has that's different from all the other spaces in Florence, and there are a bunch around here, this room that we're in right now, this freaking auditorium with a beautiful floor, you know, because the Center for the Arts is going out, there are dances that are held there, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and everybody's going, where are we going? What's going to happen now? This is a space which was spiffed up just a little bit. And if there was a little more sound insulation, because I know the neighbors across the street have feelings about sound, amplified sound after 10 o'clock at night, I'm thinking that this space could be a great resource for those kinds of activities. And ka-ching. Thanks.
My name is Sylvia House, I have a studio upstairs, and there's a bunch of other tenants that are here for this meeting. And we have also talked as we had a tenant meeting, we also talked that we as tenants are willing to do what it takes to help. This is emotional. This is the homes for businesses, and many of us have been here, I think, almost 10 years. We have been playing, and our hearts are here. We bring a lot of community members here. This is the second home for many of us, and it means the world to us. So we are really on board. We want to save this. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure that we can save this. So we want to work with
Okay, I'm Steve Uncles, I'm long-term tenant, and most of what I was going to say has been said, which is great because we have met before, we got some good ideas out of that. and more ideas tonight. One of the ideas, and it's already been said, is to have some kind of an anchor tenant that could make particularly, I think, use of this room again. It's got a lot of unmet potential. We had a chamber music concert in here, and the acoustics are great for that, actually, as long as you've got enough bodies attending to absorb sound. It's great. But anyway, so that idea of this sort of anchor tenant, along with the idea, which is kind of a parallel, kind of complementary idea, of what we had 15, 17 years ago, at least when I came here, forming the nonprofit organization, the Friends of the Florence Community Center. I think, well, I know it took the burden off the city as far as being able to handle, and I know that we have tenants now in this place that are willing to step up to the plate and be a part of this process, where we could be that nonprofit organization and try to handle matters ourselves as much as possible. I don't think we're going to pony up the money to buy the place out, right? Okay, but the idea of the leasing and everything else that happened, you know, I think that potential exists, and especially if within that organization there is a tenant that really has an interest in, say, this area for performing arts, certainly, and whatever else. And I think there's a couple other spaces that could be used for smaller activities, offices and things. The Center for the Arts being one idea. Also, I happen to know the people in Hadley in that school that's an old school building, North Star. I think they're looking for a new home over there as well. You got renewed? Okay. So, but anyway, I know that if we got the word out, we might be able to click with the needs meeting the, you know, opportunity here. So.
Very glad you raised that, actually, because I thought, thinking about sort of solutions to this issue, I thought having friends of the, you know, like our public libraries do makes a lot of sense, you know, both for logistical purposes and also, you know, as a way to maintain the space under the auspices of the city. I did want to ask, you know, given all the maintenance issues and coding issues that are causing, you know, something of a crisis, I guess, at the moment, and a lot of which are, you know, mandated either by municipal bylaws or by state and federal law, does that complicate or constrain the city's ability to renegotiate leases for this space, or to hand it off to a different, either private entity or some collaboration with a nonprofit entity? Because my thought was either we may, you know, we take the, as Councilor Labarge said, the South Street model, where there's a preferential lease and there's a kind of collective entity that deals with actual maintenance, or we actually form something like an LLC that is able to take a more formal nonprofit role if that makes it easier for the city to actually sort of hand this off. I was just wondering about the table's thoughts on that.
You want to address that, but I mean, the short answer is yes. And again, I want to reiterate the reason we're having these conversations is we're casting out for solutions as well. And we recognize the value of this asset as it's been described over and over again this evening, that you know, the prospect of this converting to some private enterprise that really doesn't necessarily have something that resonates with the neighborhood or the full, you know, the best interest of the community at large. You know, principally breaking even would be fine. I think I'm not speaking for the mayor here. I'm speaking for myself. But I think that the issue is liability and fiscal liability and other liabilities, and the fact that while $1.2 million doesn't seem like much, in a larger context, in all the other commitments and obligations and liabilities that we have, it's significant. And it's difficult to justify in a larger conversation, which is why, I mean, this is as much of an appeal as it is a listening session, too. I'm heartened to hear personally from the community that this building contains the level of devotion and commitment to it. And I would be delighted and would do what I could personally to facilitate anything that would allow us to realize a solution here that literally allows the city to break even, just to, and at the same time retain the more valuable features that have been described. So, I mean, I've never heard anything represented to the contrary from anybody at this table. So, I mean, it's just, it's cold comfort, I suppose, in some level, but it's just so you know that we're not coming to you based, as I said, we already got a plan for this, and we already got it set up, and we got a kind of buyer all lined up, and we're just paying lip service to hearing. This is not the case. Gene.
Go away from thinking that, I'm going to echo what Bill said, that there's a fix in here, because there's not. This is really, it would be as difficult for me to let this building go, but we also have to think too, this is all about economics. 2 nights from now, we're going to have to go, this is about the taxpayers. 2 nights from now, we're going to sit before the public and find out how we're going to do storm drain, how we're going to fix storm drain. We need money. It's all about funding. Everything that we do is about funding. And so if it does come out to be a break-even proposition, if you're interested in any more of this, you can come to our meeting Thursday night at the JFK School, and we'll talk about stormwater.
Actually, I wish you would come when we talk about that. We're talking about a mandated $100 million investment over 10 years. So, and we as a community have to figure this out. So I invite people to come to that. Unfortunately, there's not going to be quite as much kumbaya there as there is.
There'll be JFK at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening. Come on, come on.
We have about 7 minutes left to the time allotted, and I don't want to have anyone leave this room feeling that they haven't been heard. Is there someone who hasn't spoken that would like to say something? We have another question, sure.
There's a number on the building here, and you just get the Northampton number in exchange that you're supposed to.
I'm sorry?
When you call the number on the sign up front, it gives you, it's a general service number from Northampton and asks you which department
you want
to speak to.
David, what department do they want to speak to?
We'll take care of that. It should not say Joe's Pizza. I'm sorry.
Because I know somebody that wanted to rent this hall, and they called the number, and of course they called Mike because they knew that the school used to be in charge of it, but I don't know if that's it.
It's my department, and we're just making some additional changes, so recommend we will be up there.
Any other questions? Thank you all. Justina, who didn't say anything, it should be noted, this meeting was in no small part due to her advocacy, so thank you.
And I want to say thank you for coming here to speak to us, because it's terrifying I've been here since 1998, teaching voice. I have a studio of 50 active people at any time. I've taught hundreds and hundreds in this valley, but the same situation as the dance studios and the Pilates studios, people coming from 2 hours in any direction to work with me, and so it brings a lot of money, a lot of activity to this area. And you've heard how much this building means to us, and we're deeply grateful that you are willing to come out tonight and really meet with us face to face and really talk about possibilities rather than to feel like it's over and you know, I'm going to have to teach out of my trunk. So, we're very, very grateful that you're here, and we're very excited to start to think about possibilities, how we can really redefine who we are, because I think it's almost an identity crisis that we're looking at in a really positive way, and to figure out how to make this a place that people do want to rent and do want to use, and we're not unaware of finances being artists. So thank you very much for coming. We're very grateful
Thank
to
you.
have you here.
And please remember that this is, as I said, as much of an appeal as it is a hearing. And we will be glad to work with you and to find a solution for the best use of this, so that reflects all the values you guys expressed tonight. So thank you again very much for coming.
How will we go forward?
We'll pass on contact information. If you go to the website, there's ways to contact us. If you guys actually assemble or convene some type of meeting that you would like any one of us to attend and we're able to, we'd be glad to. I think clearly there are a number of ideas that have been floated. And obviously, the best response would be to the best proposal with the most amount of forethought that's gone into it. I mean, a lot of these things are just, on some things I heard tonight, a lot of people are just sort of grasping desperately at something, but there are solid possible things that can be done, and whatever we do or you do, let's share all of it. Okay? So
we're going to be meeting, we've been meeting the fourth Tuesday of every month at 5 o'clock. We generally meet at the council chambers. So I'm assuming the committee will come again together on the fourth Tuesday. And I think we haven't finalized it, but one of the issues I think we'll be discussing is that outside appraisal or assessment that's been done professionally will be done by then. So that will probably be something we'll be looking at at that point as well.
So the numbers will start to crystallize a little more. So. And just so you know,
Christmas. We'll probably have an alternate.
Very devoted.
Pretty hardcore about this.
By the way, as I said, all the constituents on this side are an ad hoc committee, including the mayor, and we are your legislative body representatives on the finance committee. So we're actually representing two bodies here. The meeting that he's talking about is the convening of the ad hoc committee with purpose to discuss this building exclusively.
I have one last question. Is it possible to have an entity on the ad hoc committee?
Well, this is
I will say though, we did ask Robert Ross to select some people.
That's where the guilt comes in, because
we asked for suggestions from Florence Civic Amendments. Right back at you, Robert.
So the tenants can attend those?
Most definitely, yes. Absolutely.
So I was thinking I could train about the station. That there was a foregone conclusion, this building is liquidated, and that you guys would be all out. Or dealing with the tenant, Well, I didn't that way.
But the nature of this committee is, the committee's going to make a recommendation. The recommendation can be informed by the input. So you are not going to be muted, and your voice is not going to be ignored. So.
And the city council has the ultimate.
That eventually falls on us and the other members of the council, and there's going to be a lot of bites of this apple before any decision is made. So.
When does this task force meet again? You have a scheduled meeting?
I said the fourth Tuesday, but obviously that's going to be Christmas, so we're going to have to reschedule. We've been.
I thought that was the finance committee.
It is also the finance committee meets that day, but we've been having these meetings on that fourth Tuesday, which is an off meeting of the finance committee. So they've been meeting on those days. So it's been the fourth Tuesday, but obviously for December we're going to have to reschedule a different date. So that'll be posted.
The next finance committee meeting is a council meeting, and we will not be discussing it. So just so, but you're welcome to come to public session and make comments there. at the beginning of the meeting allows you plenty of time to get home before the meeting begins at 11:30. So, thank you all again. Thank you very much.